mẹ à, nó giúp con mẹ à, mẹ mua
In a forgotten corner of the countryside, far away from the shining lights of the city, stood an abandoned house. Its roof sagged, its walls bore cracks wide enough for the wind to slip through, and during storms, rainwater streamed down into the dark, damp rooms. For most villagers, it was a place to be avoided, a shelter for stray dogs or drifters. But for John, his wife Sarah, and their 2 children, Emma, 6, and little Liam, barely 2, that house was home. Life inside those frail wooden walls was not one of comfort. Each morning, John rose before dawn. He walked barefoot down the dirt road to find day labour, hauling bricks at a construction site, chopping wood for wealthier families, or gathering scraps of metal and glass to sell for a few coins. His back ached constantly, his hands were scarred and calloused, yet his spirit remained unbroken, for his children's laughter, thin though it was, gave him reason to endure. Sarah, once a loving partner, had slowly grown weary of this endless struggle. In the early days of their marriage, she believed John's words, "As long as we stay together, we can endure anything." But years of empty cupboards, nights of Emma crying herself to sleep from hunger, and mornings when Liam woke to no milk, these wore her down. She longed for something John could not provide, a life of comfort, safety, and dignity. At first, Sarah tried to hide her discontent. She sewed torn clothes, bartered with neighbours, and kept up the facade of being a dutiful mother. But inside, her heart drifted further away from the man she once loved. Every time John returned late at night, exhausted and filthy from labour, Sarah's eyes no longer saw devotion, they saw failure. One evening, as John staggered home carrying a sack of spoiled vegetables he had begged from the market, Sarah stood waiting at the door. The dim oil lamp revealed her face, pale, rigid, and resolved. "John," she said, her voice low but steady, "I can't do this anymore." John froze. "What do you mean?" "I'm tired. Tired of poverty. Tired of living in this broken house. I need more than this. More than you can ever give." His hands shook as he dropped the sack to the floor. Emma looked up, clutching her ragged doll, sensing the tension. Liam, too young to understand, babbled in the corner. "Sarah, please," John whispered, stepping closer. "Don't say this. I know life is hard, but we'll get through it. I'll work harder. I'll do anything. Don't leave me. Don't leave them." But Sarah's tears already dried into determination. Outside, the faint roar of a motorcycle echoed. A man waited for her, a man who promised her comfort, food, and a new beginning. "I'm sorry, John," she said, pulling her arm away as he reached for her. "I have to think of myself." Emma rushed forward, clutching her mother's dress. "Mommy, where are you going? Will you buy me candy?" Sarah's lips trembled. She could not meet her daughter's eyes. She simply turned, walked out the door, and climbed onto the waiting motorcycle. The engine roared, and within seconds, she disappeared into the darkness. Silence filled the house. Emma began to cry, asking for her mother over and over. Liam, startled by the noise, joined in with a wail. John collapsed to his knees, pulling both children into his arms. Tears streamed down his face, falling into their hair. "It's all right," he murmured, his voice shaking. "Daddy's here. Daddy won't leave you. Never." That night, while the wind howled through the holes in the roof, John sat awake, staring into the shadows. The woman he loved was gone, chasing a different life, leaving him with 2 hungry mouths to feed and a heart shattered beyond repair. But as Emma and Liam slept against his chest, he knew surrender was not an option. From that moment on, his life had a single purpose: to raise his children, no matter the cost. The days after Sarah's departure blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and silent grief. At first, John hoped she might return, perhaps out of guilt or for the sake of the children. Each evening, he would glance toward the dirt road, listening for the hum of the motorcycle. But the nights dragged on, and Sarah never came back. Hope turned to resignation, and resignation hardened into resolve. John became both father and mother to Emma and Liam. In the mornings, he strapped Liam to his back with a torn piece of cloth and held Emma's hand as he walked to the nearby village. He asked a kind old widow, Mrs. Harper, to watch the children while he worked. She agreed, though she could provide only a corner of her porch and a bowl of thin soup. John always bowed his head in gratitude. Even the smallest kindness was a treasure in his world. He laboured until his body screamed in protest. He mixed cement until his hands bled, carried logs until his knees trembled, and bent his back under sacks of bricks until his spine felt ready to snap. The pay was meagre, barely enough for rice and a few vegetables, but it kept his children alive. At night, he returned to the abandoned house, where the children waited. Emma always ran to him first, her thin arms wrapping tightly around his waist. "Daddy, you're home," she cried, her eyes bright despite her hollowed cheeks. Liam, toddling unsteadily, raised his arms and squealed for John to lift him. The weight of exhaustion melted from John's shoulders in those moments. Their love gave him the strength to go on. Dinner was never more than a simple meal. Boiled potatoes, rice mixed with salt, or wild greens. Emma helped gather from the roadside. When John had no money at all, they shared only a single piece of bread. More than once, John pretended he had already eaten, so his children would not notice he went hungry. Yet, in the silence of the night, when the children finally slept, John often sat alone by the flickering lamp, his hands trembling. He thought of Sarah, of the warmth they once shared. He wondered if she thought of them at all. But every time despair crept close, he looked at Emma's sleeping face, at Liam's tiny fists clutching his shirt, even in dreams, and he remembered his vow, "Never will I abandon them." The whispers of the villagers were not kind. Some pitied him, but more often they whispered behind his back. "There goes John, the man whose wife ran off. No wonder she left. He can't even feed his children. A failure of a husband, a failure of a father." Their words cut deep. But John never raised his voice, never argued. He carried his pain silently, focusing on his work and his children. Over time, those whispers changed. As the villagers watched him struggle day after day, never giving up, some began to soften. Mrs. Harper would slip him an extra loaf of bread. A farmer occasionally handed him bruised fruit. Even those who once sneered began to nod in quiet respect when he passed. Emma's growing strength, Emma, though only 6, grew quickly under hardship. She woke early to sweep the floor of their fragile home, to fetch water from the well, and to keep Liam entertained while John worked. She learned to cook simple meals, balancing on a stool as she stirred a pot of soup. "Daddy, eat more," she often insisted, pushing her share toward him. But John smiled, shaking his head. "No, sweetheart. You need to grow strong. Daddy is fine." What he did not tell her was that sometimes his stomach ached with hunger, but the pride he felt in her resilience filled him more than food ever could. The stormy night. One evening, a violent storm struck. The wind roared, tearing at the roof, and rain poured through the cracks. Thunder rattled the house as water flooded the floor. Liam cried in terror, clinging to John's neck. Emma pressed against her father's side, trembling. John spread his arms wide, shielding both children with his body. The icy water soaked his clothes, but he whispered softly, "Don't be afraid. Daddy is here. Daddy will always be here." That night, as lightning split the sky, John realized he was not just protecting them from the storm outside. He was protecting them from a world that had already stolen too much. A flicker of hope. Weeks turned into months. John patched the roof with wood scraps he scavenged, hammered broken boards into the walls, and slowly transformed the abandoned house into something resembling a home. It was far from perfect, but when the fire crackled and his children laughed, John felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. One afternoon, Emma returned from school clutching a crumpled piece of paper. She held it out with shy pride. "Daddy, look, I got a certificate. Teacher said I read better than anyone in class." John's rough hands trembled as he unfolded the paper. The words blurred through the tears in his eyes. He had never received such recognition in his life, but now, through Emma, he felt victorious. He lifted her high into the air, spinning her around until both children laughed. For John, the certificate was not just a piece of paper. It was proof that his sacrifices were not in vain. His children would have a better life. And so in that broken house, amid hardship and hunger, a small light of hope burned brighter. Years passed. Seasons turned, one after another. Emma grew into a bright, determined young girl of 12, her hair long and her eyes sharp with wisdom beyond her age. Liam, once a toddler clinging to his father's shirt, was now an energetic 8-year-old, chasing chickens in the yard and asking endless questions about the world. The abandoned house that had once been their cage of misery was slowly transformed by John's hands. Piece by piece, plank by plank, he rebuilt it. The roof no longer leaked in storms. The walls, though patched with mismatched wood, stood firm. A small garden sprouted outside where Emma tended vegetables and Liam tried, often unsuccessfully, to help. Laughter began to echo in the corners where once there had only been silence and tears. John's body carried the scars of toil. His shoulders stooped from years of lifting heavy loads. His skin was burned dark by the sun, and silver streaks ran through his hair. But his spirit, once crushed by Sarah's departure, now shone with quiet strength. He had made it this far, and his children were thriving. That was all that mattered. Then, one autumn afternoon, the past returned. John was mending a fence when he heard the growl of an engine. A sleek car rolled up the dirt road, kicking dust into the air. He paused, confused. No car ever came this way. The door opened and out stepped Sarah. She was almost unrecognizable. Her dress was elegant, her shoes polished, her face painted with subtle makeup, but beneath the surface her eyes carried a wariness that John recognized instantly. Emma froze on the porch, clutching her school books. Liam, wide-eyed, peeked from behind her. Neither child moved. Sarah's lips parted, trembling. "John, kids, She broke off, tears welling in her eyes. John stood silent, hammer still in hand. The memories of that night years ago surged back. Emma crying, Liam screaming, himself begging. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Why are you here, Sarah?" His voice was calm, almost cold. "I made a mistake," she whispered, stepping closer. "I thought I'd find happiness, but it all fell apart. The man I left with, he lied, he used me, and when I was no longer useful, he cast me aside. I had nothing, John, nothing but regret." Emma's hands clenched into fists. She stepped forward, shielding Liam behind her. "You left us," she said, her voice sharp, trembling with anger. "You left Daddy. You left me and Liam. We cried every night. Do you know that? Do you know what you did to us?" Sarah's face crumpled. She reached out, but Emma pulled back, her eyes blazing. John finally set the hammer down and walked closer, his eyes fixed on Sarah. "You chose your path," he said quietly, "and we chose ours. Do you see these children? They are strong. They are alive because I stayed. Because I did not give up. We learned how to live without you." Sarah's tears spilled freely. She sank to her knees in the dirt. "Please, John, please give me another chance. I want to be a mother again. I want to make it right." For a long moment, silence hung heavy. The wind rustled the trees, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. Finally, John shook his head. "You are their mother by blood, Sarah. Nothing can change that, but you lost the right to be their mother in their hearts when you walked away. We survived without you. We no longer need you to survive." Emma slipped her hand into John's, her chin lifted proudly. Liam hesitated, then hugged his father's leg, eyes confused but trusting. John looked down at his children, then back at Sarah. "I will not let you hurt them again." He turned away, leading Emma and Liam toward the house. Sarah remained kneeling on the ground. sobbing, watching the family she had abandoned disappear back into the home that no longer belonged to her. The sleek car sat waiting, gleaming and useless in the dust. Sarah had chased comfort, but in the end she had lost the one thing that mattered most. Part 4. Legacy and Renewal. Life went on, as it always does. Sarah's visit faded into memory, a painful reminder of the past, but also a confirmation of what John already knew. His children were his true wealth. Emma grew more disciplined, throwing herself into her studies. She dreamed of becoming a teacher to help other children like herself. At night, she often read aloud by the dim lamplight, her voice steady as Liam listened in wonder. "One day, Daddy," she said softly, "I'll buy you a new house. A house with no holes, no leaks, no broken walls. You'll never have to work so hard again." Liam, playful yet thoughtful, often tugged at John's sleeve and asked, "Daddy, why did Mommy leave? Was it because of me?" Each time, John knelt down, cupped his son's face and said, "No, my boy, she left because of her own choices. You and Emma are my greatest gifts. Never forget that." The bond between the three of them grew unbreakable. Hardship continued. There were still lean days, still moments of hunger, still cruel whispers from those who judged, but they no longer bowed under the weight of despair. Instead, they leaned on each other. John became a symbol in the village. The man once mocked for being abandoned now earned quiet respect. People saw the way his children thrived under his care. They saw the dignity in his labour, the honesty in his eyes. Even those who once sneered now nodded in admiration. The father's legacy. Years later, when Emma entered college on a scholarship, she wrote in her journal, "My father carried us through storms, through hunger, through loneliness. He never complained, never gave up. When I stand tall, it is because I stand on his shoulders. When I succeed, it is because he sacrificed everything so I could dream. I will spend the rest of my life honouring him." Liam too grew to cherish his father's sacrifices. As a young man, he often repeated the words John had told him as a boy, "We never abandon those we love." It became his guiding principle, shaping the way he treated others, shaping the man he would become. As John grew older, his back bent and his steps slowed. But in his twilight years, he never felt poor. Sitting outside the once abandoned house, now a lively home filled with books, laughter and warmth, he watched Emma and Liam thrive. He saw the seeds he had planted bloom into a legacy far greater than wealth. And he knew at last that though Sarah had broken his heart, she had not broken his spirit. His love for his children had rebuilt his life from ruins. In the end, it was not riches or comfort that defined John's story, but resilience, sacrifice, and the enduring power of a father's love. Time, that silent thief, moved relentlessly forward. The abandoned house of John's past slowly disappeared under layers of repair, love, and memory. It was no longer a ruin whispered about in pity, but a place of warmth that carried the weight of countless stories. The broken roof that once leaked rain had been replaced. The dirt floor had been smoothed. The garden flourished with vegetables and flowers. What was once despair had become a testament to endurance. Emma, after years of tireless study, fulfilled her dream. She became a teacher. Standing in front of her students, chalk in hand, she carried herself with the quiet strength she had inherited from her father. Her lessons were not only of numbers and words, but also of resilience. She often told her students, "Even if the world abandons you, you must never abandon yourself. Strength is born in the darkest nights." Though she rarely mentioned her family directly, her heart always returned to the image of John working late into the night, repairing the roof with bleeding hands, whispering lullabies to Liam, smiling at Emma's smallest victories. Liam, with his playful spirit tempered by hardship, grew into a man of principle. He pursued carpentry, using his hands to build what others could not. For him, every nail he hammered, every chair he carved, was a continuation of his father's legacy. to create, to mend, to hold things together even when the world threatened to break them apart, remembering their father. Years later, when John's hair had turned entirely white and his body weakened with age, Emma and Liam often sat beside him on the porch during quiet evenings. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting golden light over their home. John would rest in his chair, smiling as his children recounted their day. "Do you remember?" Emma would ask with a soft laugh. "How you used to patch the roof with broken boards? And I'd complain that it still leaked on my pillow?" John chuckled, his voice rough with age. "I remember. And you said one day you'd buy me a house with no leaks. You kept your word, Emma. This house may not be perfect, but it is ours, and it is full of love. That's worth more than gold." Liam would lean forward, eyes bright. "And do you remember the night of the big storm? I was crying, but you covered me with your arms. You said, 'Daddy is here. Daddy will always be here.'" John's eyes glistened. "I meant it, son. Every word." They sat together in silence after that, the bond between them deeper than any words could describe. The passing of time. Eventually, as all stories must, John's journey reached its end. On a quiet morning, with the sun filtering gently through the patched roof he had once laboured to fix, John closed his eyes for the last time. His children were at his side, holding his hands, whispering their love into his fading breaths. When the village heard of his passing, many came to pay respects. They remembered the man who had once been mocked, then respected, then admired. They remembered the sight of him walking home with weary steps, children clinging to him, his spirit unbroken. Emma and Liam buried their father beside the garden he had planted. On his gravestone they carved words that reflected the truth of his life. "A father's love is the roof under which no storm can destroy us." The legacy lives on. Years later, Emma would sit at her desk late at night, grading papers. Sometimes she paused, staring out the window at the stars. She imagined her father watching, proud of the woman she had become. She whispered into the night, "I hope I made you proud, Daddy." Liam, too, carried his father's lessons into his craft. Each time he built a sturdy roof, he thought of the nights John shielded him from rain with nothing but his own body. Each time he repaired a broken chair, he thought of how John had pieced together their broken lives. And whenever he saw a struggling father with children at his side, he offered help without hesitation, for he knew what it meant to bear such a burden. Together, Emma and Liam kept their father alive in every action, every choice, every kindness. A story told as the years rolled on. Their own children, John's grandchildren, grew curious about the old man in the photographs. They asked Emma and Liam, "What was Grandpa like?" Emma would smile softly, her voice filled with reverence. "He was the strongest man I ever knew, not because of his muscles, but because of his heart. He carried us through storms. He gave us everything he had, even when it meant he went without. He never let us feel alone." Liam would add, "He taught us that family is not about comfort or wealth. It is about staying, no matter how hard it gets. He was our protector, our teacher, our hero." And so the story of John, the man who lived in an abandoned house, who was left by his wife, who raised his children with nothing but love and unyielding strength, was passed down through generations. It became not just a memory, but a legend. A reminder that even in the harshest poverty, even when abandoned by those you trust most, love can rebuild what life tries to tear apart. Reflection. John's life was not easy. It was marked by hardship, loneliness, and betrayal. Yet it was also illuminated by resilience, sacrifice, and the purest form of love. In the end, he proved that wealth is fleeting, comfort is fragile, but the bond of family, the choice to stay, to endure, to protect, is eternal. And in the laughter of Emma's students, in the strength of Liam's carpentry, in the bright eyes of grandchildren who would never meet him but would always know his story, John lived on. For though Sarah had once abandoned her family in search of love elsewhere, it was John who showed the world the truest definition of love. Not in words, not in promises, but in the quiet daily sacrifices of a father who refused to walk away.